Welcome back to the program. So let's talk about something that's even more important than the Iran war, that's more important than DHS, that's more important than ICE and immigration. And of course it is, right here, wrong collar, the SAVE Act. That's what that says, pass the Save America Act. I will be wearing one on every show moving forward, except for the leather jacket one, of course. But when I have a blazer on, I will have that on until we pass this thing. Now, right now, no one's talking about it. I'm still talking about it. I'm not going to stop talking about it because I believe it is the most important thing in America, hands down. It gives us the best shot, of course, to win the midterm elections. And we have to be focused like a laser on it. Now, I have said all along that there's no way this is going to get done through budget reconciliation, right? Budget reconciliation means that you have to have monetary policy when it comes to doing a reconciliation bill. That's how the one big beautiful bill was able to pass the Senate parliamentarian, even though that bitch stripped out a bunch of really good stuff that we never got into the final bill. The fact that we would use budget reconciliation now in its current form would automatically, in my opinion, and Mike Lee's opinion, and Anna Paulina Luna's opinion, automatically have everything for the SAVE Act completely stripped out. So I have been a big, opponent of using budget reconciliation. Now, Senator Kennedy has said, the ever optimistic, funny man, Kennedy has said, well, we got to find some smart lawyers in Washington, D.C. that are worth their weight in salt, and they need to come up with some way to make this budgetary so that it will pass the Byrd rule, which we'll get into in a little bit, and we can get this past the Senate parliamentarian. So like he says, we're not going to get the votes to do it any other way. These lazy bastards aren't going to do the talking filibuster, at least not yet. So let's do it through reconciliation. Now, I have said, after hearing that, and after realizing what it's all about, that this is a head fake. This is a way for them to basically pass it through reconciliation and go, sorry folks, hey, the Senate parliamentarian, don't blame us, blame the Senate parliamentarian. She's the one that stripped everything out, right? And clearly in its current form, that's exactly what would happen. However, in doing some research, I came across something that possibly could change even my mind on budget reconciliation. It's very creative. It was from somebody on a Substack, and we'll get to it in a minute. But first, I want to play Kennedy on Fox News talking about the SAVE Act, and in particular, using budget reconciliation.
Reconciliation. Now, some of my Republican colleagues say we can't get it past the Budget Control Act, which controls what we can do in reconciliation. How the hell do they know? We haven't even tried yet. There are a lot of smart lawyers in this country that can draft a bill that I think can pass what we call the Budget Control Act and get past the parliamentarian. I've seen plenty of provisions get past the parliamentarian that I didn't think had a chance, and vice versa. But my point is, why not give it a shot?
Yeah.
If what we're doing is not going to work, I hope I'm wrong, but I don't hear any Democrats changing their mind. Then why don't we do something that will work? I mean, it's a matter of common sense to me, but I'm in the minority on this among Republicans. I freely admit that.
But you're saying if you could get it through on reconciliation, I'm sorry.
I'm just going to say, I'm not in the majority on my side, but sometimes the majority just means all the fools are on the same side. I'm not calling my colleagues fools. I'm just saying, okay, where's plan B? Plan A may not work. Where's plan B?
So anyway, that was Senator Kennedy talking about reconciliation and saying we've got to have some smart lawyers out there that can figure out a way to put this thing all together and get it to pass the Senate parliamentarian. Not an easy task. However, there is a possible way of doing this, believe it or not. And I didn't think it was possible, but in reading this person's information, it might be. Okay? This is from somebody named S.W. Lyon on Substack. First, let's talk about Senator Mike Lee's critique. Reconciliation won't work. And as written, he's correct. This bill will not work. Senator Lee says the SAVE Act cannot pass reconciliation because it is, quote, unavoidably non-budgetary. Exactly what I was talking about. And essentially, it would be impossible. Representative Luna then says, forget this, it won't work. Let's call on the Senate to deliver with the talking filibuster or step aside and get new leadership. So again, she's talking about replacing John Thune. I doubt these idiots are going to do that, okay? Both identify the problem. However, the bill reads like election policy, not as budgetary policy. So here could be the fix. Rewriting the bill so that spending, not election policy, but spending drives the policy. Senator Lee says the SAVE Act isn't budgetary, and he's absolutely right in its current version. However, if we rewrote the bill so that the citizenship verification mandate requires $700 million in federal grants to function, then you can have uniform proof of citizenship across all 50 states. So what this person is basically saying is, okay, right now it's an election bill. What if we then spend in federal grant money the amount that we would need to make sure that every single state has new equipment that would verify whether or not that person was a U.S. citizen? So in other words, a version of almost like E-Verify, but also with new poll books and things like that in every election, in every district across the country. And so that should cost roughly about $700 million to do all 50 states. Then it says you can't have uniform proof of citizenship across 50 states without spending the money to do it. And you can't have that spending without a verification standard. So at this point, the budget effect becomes integral, not incidental. How the budget reconciliation language could look. If we frame this not as a policy, but as a financial grant to give and allocate to all of the 50 states, then it might be more of a fiscal budgetary grant rather than, quote, a policy. The section would authorize, if it was budgetary, a $500 million in mandatory grants to the Election Assistance Commission. That would then be distributed to states implementing the Uniform Proof of Citizenship verification systems, including federal database integration, document assistance programs, and even some technical upgrades. So in other words, what are we saying? We're basically saying that even though government doesn't necessarily, quote, have to spend this money, we're spending money to get past the Senate parliamentarian so that that person can't say, this is policy, not budgetary. In other words, we're spending money that technically we don't even need to spend, but we're doing it anyway in order to try to facilitate passing this with 50+1. Does that make sense? Hopefully it does. An additional $200 million would support the Department of Justice enforcement, offset by $100 million more to HAVA, Help America Vote Act, which in my book I said should be repealed. This would then direct net deficit spending meeting what is known as the Byrd Rule criteria or the Congressional Budget Act, as Kennedy was stating in that interview. So what exactly then is the Byrd Rule? Well, first off, it's named after Robert KKK Byrd, who was the grand wizard of the KKK. This is how much the Democrats were, the racist back then, right? You remember him? They wheeled him out. Eventually he died, but he was like 98 years old. Every single hospital, airport, municipal building is the Robert Byrd Building in West Virginia. His name is everywhere, okay? This was a old school Democrat. This was someone that Joe Biden said was his mentor, like a god to him, okay? Total racist KKK. Anyway, the Byrd Rule is Section 313 of the Congressional Budget Act. It is a Senate rule that allows members to strike extraneous non-budgetary provisions from reconciliation bills which are otherwise immune to filibusters. It prevents using expedited procedures to pass major policy changes that lack a direct, non-incidental impact on federal spending or revenue. So what does that mean? It means that this spending isn't just an add-on, it's a mechanism to get the SAVE Act to pass. States then get funds, if they comply, for their election. So it neither exists without the other. So basically what they're saying here is if we spend enough money and we do the infrastructure and we do all the things that we need in order to verify the systems for the votes and everything else, we can turn this into budgetary policy, not just policy, is what they're saying, okay? It's deep in the weeds, and I get it, and some of you might be scratching your head, and I understand that as well. But that's the rewrite on how this could possibly work. Now, why the parliamentarian could actually approve this version. The Byrd Rule asks if budget effects exceed incidental policy changes. Well, if that is to be, then this refinement goes even further. The grant program would be leading the policy. It would be leading as far as budgetary policy. Then you attach the standards as verification, eligibility conditions, all of that implementation, and those costs and that spending becomes what? Essential budgetary policy spending. Congress can't mandate national standards without paying for them. This is how it might actually pass the Senate parliamentarian. A concrete next step. Kennedy floated theory. Senator Lee clarified why the current bill fails. First, confirm that you have the 50 GOP senators who will vote for this draft. Then, test the draft with the Senate parliamentarian. Does it survive the Byrd review? If not, what changes would make it compliant? Why this works politically. Voters overwhelmingly support, obviously, voter ID, 85% independents, 70-something% Democrats, and 99% Republicans. Republicans owe them a real plan. Reconciliation offers 51 votes without the filibuster if the parliamentarian would agree. Lee's critique shows exactly not what's wrong, but what needs fixing. So, yes, this is out in the weeds. Yes, this is the only thing I have seen that even talked about using budget reconciliation in any real way to pass the SAVE Act. But this person might be onto something. I don't know if it's a he or she, but they might be onto something. Maybe if they can bring this into the Senate and negotiate it with the top lawyers out there that know all the tricks of the trade, know how to do things, know how to word things, and figure out a way to get this thing past the parliamentarian as budgetary policy, not just election policy, then it's possible that we could pass the Save America Act with 50 votes and J.D. Vance. If not, we're still going to continue to fight to see if we can get the talking filibuster. We're still going to continue to fight to make sure that these people are motivated to get us election integrity. One way or another, we're going to make it happen. Those are my thoughts. What are yours? Put them down in the comments below. We'll see you in the next one.